I am for quarantines. Quarantine is where you keep people for a 21-day period. We believe we should have quarantines because there is no fault in trying. Even if our quarantines don't work, it can't hurt to try. I have 6 reasons I want to say. My first reason is quarantines help doctors so they know how Ebola is working. My second reason, quarantines help so we know more about Ebola. My third reason, quarantines also keep the disease from spreading. Like I like to say, if you go home and you have the disease, if there was no quarantine and you have the disease and you go home and then you could give it to your family members. And yes.
You said that quarantine won't spread, but I say that quarantine does spread, and it said it in the article too.
I didn't necessarily say it won't. It does not spread. All right. I said that it does spread, but quarantines will help it to not spread. My fourth reason is quarantines make sure that they don't have the disease, so it doesn't spread. My fifth reason, quarantine keeps other people safe from the disease. My sixth reason is quarantines help it, keeps it at its core, so people want this. They want this because they don't want to get the disease. So if they keep people in quarantine, then other people won't get the disease. And that's why we think we should have quarantines.
We believe that we should not quarantine the borders. Our first reason we should not quarantine the borders is doctors, nurses, and many other medicalists are trying to travel to Africa to save infected people with Ebola. No. Also, if we quarantine the borders, that means we can't send as many supplies to Africa, which is the best way to save people in Africa from being Ebola.
We still could send the supplies over there. We're just protecting people. We're just keeping the people over there who could have it or have it already, but other people are free to travel, so we can still send things over there and send doctors.
I said we can't send as many supplies. Another reason we shouldn't quarantine the borders is there are no reasons to quarantine the borders because all the people at airports need to do is check for high fever and tell passengers how to protect themselves. And our final reason we think the U.S. should not quarantine the borders is people in West Africa that do not have Ebola, they are trying to escape West Africa and come to America. Yes.
They can still get away from it. It's just quarantining people who have the high fevers.
I think our position is the best because I believe that if we do end up quarantining the borders, it will bother other people and we could end up in more sickness and people will end up dying. Yes.
It doesn't always end up like that. If people stay away, if people are in quarantine, if they're in a contained place, then it doesn't always mean that other people are going to get it. Because the doctor's there that if the person does have it, then nobody else can get it because nobody else is in there with them. And the doctor's still going there with them that if they have the disease, can do wear suits that will protect them.
And I'm pretty sure if a 3-year-old can make through Ebola, then I'm pretty sure a bunch of other people could. It might not make them die. Quarantines aren't what make people die, it's what keeps people alive longer.
Ethan?
You said all they have to do is check for temperatures, but signs of Ebola shows up 21 days after you get it.
Our first reasons for quarantining is keeping it at its source. The nurse in the article said that the best way to contain a disease and keep it from spreading is to keep it at its source. If we're gonna keep if we're gonna keep Ebola where we want it to keep it, we need to keep it at its source, and we need to do quarantine so that people who want to get away from it can get away from it. We're only containing people with high fevers and chances of getting Ebola. Our second reason is that quarantining keeps the disease from spreading. The Ebola is not airborne. It cannot come from, like, you could go home with your family and you could get Ebola. The only way that they could get Ebola is from if you drink a glass of water and your mom doesn't wear gloves and she washes that cup, she could get Ebola because she touched your saliva. And our third reason is quarantining makes sure that people are healthy to go. But they might not have Ebola, but it's always good to make sure because we want to contain Ebola and we want to make sure that no one gets Ebola over here, so that if people get over here, we don't waste our supplies and we could just send it over to West Africa to help get rid of Ebola. And in the article it said that most Americans want it to happen. Over half of the Americans want it to happen because they want their families to be safe. And still, if they get it, they can keep their family safe by coming and getting treated. It's not like it's not like we keep everyone in quarantines for more than 21 days. It's only 21 days, and if they get it, we take them to a hospital and we get them treated. And if they have it and they're in West Africa, we can still send doctors over there with suits and supplies that they need, even though their hospitals may not work. We have the supplies that can help their hospitals be better. And those are our reasons for why we should do quarantines.
Most people are trying to travel to Africa to save many people from Ebola. George Benjamin says he saw a system of health and custom officials on high alert for ill passengers screening using temperature monitors at airports to implore passengers how to protect themselves by Ebola. We need to send many supplies to help affected people. We need to ensure rapid passage of people in and out of the area for response purposes, but we also need to ensure the continued flow of supplies desperately needed to address the outbreak of its source, which is the best way to break the chain of infection. People working at airports will need to check for high fever and telling people how to protect themselves by not getting Ebola. George Benjamin says sound surveillance, case finding, and monitoring and treatment is appropriate.
You said that they need to check for high fevers and tell them that they need to know how to protect themselves. But what if they have Ebola and it hasn't been 21 days yet? The signs don't show up until 21 days after they would check the fever. If they have a high fever, they would need to go in quarantine just in case they do have Ebola.
You said at the beginning that most people are trying to get to West Africa to heal the people that have Ebola, but it's only doctors and normal, like, people who aren't qualified to be doctors aren't necessarily going.
People are trying to escape from Ebola and can't get away from it. We also need to ensure the continued flow of many supplies desperately needed to address the outbreak of its source.
We believe in quarantines because it can help doctors learn about the diseases and develop medicines and cures. That's why we should send doctors over to West Africa instead of letting infected people come over here and wipe out a lot of Americans out. We need to keep it at its source. They wouldn't have to worry about quarantines if they have them monitoring themselves. That's why we should have quarantines.
Quarantine stating our reasons. Doctors are trying to travel there to Africa to save people. People working at hospitals just need to check for high fever and tell them how to protect themselves. We need to send supplies to help infected people in
people trying to escape Ebola can't get away from it. And as you can see, this is why we think the U.S. should not close borders.